The air in Miami, it didn't just feel hot. It felt heavy, thick with humidity, cheap cologne, and the metallic tang of fresh blood. Look, when the police finally walked into the Dadeland Mall in 1979, the air was still choked with cordite. Bodies were slumped over steering wheels, shattered glass glittering like diamonds on the pavement. The city's homicide detectives thought they understood the mob. They thought they understood organized crime, right? But they were looking for men in sharp suits. They were looking for the Italian Mafia. They were not looking for a 4'11" mother of four. They weren't looking for a woman whose ruthlessness would make even Pablo Escobar hesitate in the dark. I mean, she didn't look like a kingpin. She looked like someone's aunt. But beneath that unassuming exterior was the architect of the most violent drug war in American history. A woman who didn't just break the glass ceiling of the underworld, she shattered it with a hail of bullets. Now, if you want to know how an illiterate runaway built a $2 billion cocaine empire over the bodies of three husbands, rivals, and anyone who looked at her sideways, hit that subscribe button. You're watching Breaking Omerta, and today we are pulling back the veil on the Black Widow herself, Griselda Blanco. Here's the thing, to understand the monster, you have to understand the crucible that forged her. You follow me? Griselda wasn't born into royalty. She was born into the dirt of Cartagena in 1943 and quickly moved to the merciless slums of Medellin. In these barrios, survival wasn't a right. It was a daily, brutal competition. You didn't learn ethics here. You learned leverage. While other little girls were playing with dolls, Griselda was studying the anatomy of power. The legend of Griselda's first kill is whispered in the underworld like a dark fairy tale. Picture this, she's 11 years old. The smell of stale sweat and rotting fruit hangs in the air. Griselda and a few street urchins spot a boy from the wealthy flatlands. They snatch him, they drag him into the hills. It's a standard ransom play. But when the boy's wealthy parents refuse to pay, thinking it's just a bluff from street rats, Griselda doesn't panic. She doesn't cry. She doesn't let him go. She picks up a gun, and she pulls the trigger. For Griselda, this wasn't an act of passion. It wasn't childhood cruelty. It was a business transaction, a message to the world. I do not bluff. That cold, terrifying pragmatism would become the cornerstone of her entire empire. Now, by the early 1970s, Griselda had outgrown the dusty streets of Colombia. Alongside her second husband, Alberto Bravo, she touched down in Queens, New York. The Italian Mafia controlled the heroin, but Griselda and Alberto saw a massive, untapped market: cocaine. The problem: how do you move kilos of white powder past customs when border agents are looking for nervous men with stuffed suitcases? This is where Griselda's twisted genius truly shone. She understood a fundamental flaw in the system: the male gaze. Make sense? Customs agents were men. They were trained to profile, but their biases made them blind to women, especially women who knew how to present themselves. Griselda didn't just hire mules, she engineered a system. She opened a legitimate lingerie factory back in Colombia, but they weren't making standard garments. No, they were tailoring custom bras and girdles with secret reinforced compartments. She would hire young, attractive women, dress them impeccably, and load them with kilos of cocaine hidden right against their skin. When these women walked through JFK Airport, the agents weren't looking for contraband. They were just looking at the women. Griselda weaponized femininity, turning the very thing the underworld dismissed into an invisible, unstoppable fleet. The system was flawless. The cash flowed in like a tidal wave. They were pulling in millions, living in a sprawling estate in Queens, completely untouchable. Griselda had built the pipeline. Alberto managed the money. But look, in the underworld, success is just a beacon for the wolves. The DEA, led by Operation Banshee, was closing in. The net was tightening. In 1975, the feds dropped the hammer, indicting Griselda and her crew. Most criminals would have folded, most would have taken a plea or ended up in a concrete box, but Griselda Blanco wasn't most criminals. Before the handcuffs could click, she vanished, ghosted, fleeing back to the safety of Colombia, leaving the New York market in absolute chaos. The DEA patted themselves on the back. They thought they had severed the head of the snake, but they had made a fatal miscalculation. Griselda wasn't running away, she was just reloading. The feds hadn't ended her reign, they had simply forced her to evolve. And what she was about to unleash on the sun-soaked, neon-lit streets of Miami wouldn't just break the law, it would rewrite the rules of the underworld in blood. But that is a story for Chapter 2. When Griselda Blanco arrived in Miami, the city was a sleepy retirement town, pastel pinks and seafoam greens. But beneath the surface of the turquoise water, a new kind of apex predator was circling. The Colombians had arrived, and they were tired of paying a tax to the Italian mob. But to take over a city, you need more than just a superior product. You need a monopoly on violence. Now, in the underworld, violence is usually a blunt instrument, a tool used when negotiations fail. But for Griselda, violence wasn't the backup plan. It was the marketing strategy. And to execute it, she didn't just hire thugs, she invented a completely new methodology of murder, a system so efficient, so terrifyingly fast, that it would change the way law enforcement operated forever. Imagine this, you're a rival dealer, you're checking your watch, feeling the warm Florida sun on your neck. You hear the whine of a dirt bike, but in a city of tourists, you don't look twice. That's your first and last mistake. The motorcycle doesn't stop. It doesn't even slow down. The motorcycle drive-by. It seems like a staple of crime movies today, right? But it was pioneered by Griselda Blanco. It was the perfect crime. High mobility, zero warning, and impossible to chase in a heavy police cruiser. Her pistoleros were young, desperate men from the slums of Medellin, loyal only to the Godmother. They didn't leave fingerprints, they didn't leave witnesses, they only left a message. Miami belongs to Griselda. And Miami paid beautifully. By the dawn of the 1980s, the Godmother was moving an estimated 300 kilos of cocaine a month. Do the math. In 1980s money, she was pulling in tens of millions of dollars every single weekend. She bought a waterfront mansion. She threw lavish parties where cocaine was served in silver bowls like party favors. She even bought the diamond ring that once belonged to the former First Lady of Argentina, Eva Perón. Griselda wasn't just making money, she was making a point. She was a queen, demanding tribute. But here's the problem with building a throne out of skulls. Eventually, it starts to get unsteady. The money was infinite, but Griselda's paranoia was growing faster than her bank account. She began to see enemies in every shadow. If a distributor was late with a payment, she didn't restructure the debt, she sent the motorcycles. If an associate looked at her with an ounce of disrespect, they were found in the trunk of a Cadillac. She was breaking the golden rule of the cartel: don't draw the heat. Her relentless, indiscriminate slaughter was bad for business. It was forcing the local police, the DEA, and the FBI to form joint task forces. The other heavyweights in the Medellin cartel, including a rising star named Pablo Escobar, were watching Miami turn into a war zone, and they knew the Godmother was out of control.
Griselda Blanco had successfully declared war on the entire Miami underworld. She thought she was invincible. She thought the fear she instilled would keep the wolves at bay.
But she was about to realize that when you back a desperate animal into a corner, it doesn't cower, it bites. The cartel was preparing a coup, and Griselda was about to unleash a bloodbath that would make her previous sins look like child's play. Hit subscribe, because in Chapter 3, the streets of Miami run red, and the Godmother faces the ultimate betrayal. Before you can rule an empire, you have to clean your own house. And by the mid-70s, Griselda's house was built on a foundation of lies. She had discovered a discrepancy in the books. Millions of dollars were missing from the New York operation, and the thief wasn't a rival or a street-level dealer. It was Alberto Bravo, her business partner, her mentor, her husband. Look, most women in the 1970s hired a divorce lawyer. Griselda Blanco, she brought an Uzi. She arranged a meeting in a dusty parking lot under the guise of reconciliation, but there was no talking. The second she stepped out of the car, the parking lot erupted into a deafening storm of lead. It wasn't a hit, it was a war. Alberto managed to squeeze off a shot that tore into Griselda's stomach, but Alberto, he took a barrage to the face. She walked away bleeding, leaving her husband dead in the dirt. It was right then, in that blood-soaked lot, that the legend of the Black Widow was truly born. She didn't just inherit the empire, she conquered it. And with Alberto out of the way, she took her newly consolidated power straight to South Florida. It was time to unleash hell. Which brings us back to the Dadeland Mall. This wasn't a random shootout. It was a hostile corporate takeover orchestrated by the Godmother's personal death squad, the Pistoleros. To join this elite fraternity of killers, you couldn't just hand in a resume. You had to cut off a piece of an enemy and bring it to Griselda as a trophy. They were a cult, and she was their bloodthirsty deity. When the Pistoleros walked into Crown Liquors, they weren't there to negotiate with the Jimenez cartel. In broad daylight, in front of terrified families buying shoes and ice cream, they unleashed a storm of automatic fire that turned the store into a meat grinder. When the smoke cleared, the message was written in blood across the shattered glass. Miami was a closed market. Anyone operating outside of Griselda's shadow would be butchered. The Dadeland Massacre was the spark that ignited the Cocaine Cowboy Wars. Miami transformed from a sunny retirement haven into the murder capital of the world. The violence was so absolute, so overwhelming, that the Dade County morgue ran out of space. They literally had to rent refrigerated fast food trucks just to stack the bodies of Griselda's enemies. She was drowning the city in blood, and she was loving every single second of it. But absolute power breeds absolute paranoia. The bazooka she was smoking was rotting her mind, turning her ruthless pragmatism into pure, unadulterated madness. Enter Fernando Papo Mejia, a rival trafficker who refused to bend the knee. Griselda didn't just want him dead, she wanted a spectacle. She wanted a theatrical display of sadism. She sent a hitman to track Papo down at the Miami airport, but she explicitly forbade him from using a gun. That was too quick, too clean. In the middle of the crowded terminal, the assassin lunged, driving a vintage World War II bayonet through Papo's chest. He survived, but the psychological terror was absolute. Griselda was sending a message that she could reach you anywhere, with anything, and she would make it hurt. By 1982, Griselda Blanco was at the apex of the criminal underworld. She had beaten the Italians, she had terrified the Colombians, she had bought off the cops. She thought she was a god, but gods only fall when their own angels turn against them. The DEA was finally organizing a specialized task force, CENTAC 26, to hunt her down. But the agents wouldn't be the ones to break the Godmother.
The knife in her back was gonna come from the man she trusted most. His name was Jorge Ayala. He was her favorite hitman, the man who pulled the trigger for her most gruesome orders. And he was about to become the most dangerous weapon the United States government ever possessed. Hit subscribe, because in Chapter 5, the paranoia reaches a boiling point. The ultimate betrayal is set in motion, and the Godmother's empire begins to burn from the inside out. Now, the suburbs of Orange County, California are a masterclass in American banality. Cul-de-sacs, station wagons, neighborhood watch meetings. It is the absolute last place on earth you'd expect the architect of the Miami drug wars. Griselda Blanco had traded her bulletproof limousines for anonymity. She thought if she stayed quiet, the ghosts of the hundreds of bodies she left in Florida wouldn't be able to cross state lines. But the ghosts had a badge. DEA agent Bob Palumbo had spent years chasing the phantom of Griselda Blanco. He had obsessed over her. He knew the names of her children, her hitmen, her victims. On February 18, 1985, he finally walked into a bedroom. She didn't reach for a gun. She just sat there, the Bible resting on her lap. In one of the most surreal, bizarre moments in law enforcement history, Palumbo walked up to the woman responsible for turning Miami into a slaughterhouse, and he kissed her on the cheek. "We finally meet, Griselda," he whispered.
The hunt was over. Look, the state of Florida didn't just want Griselda behind bars. They wanted blood. They wanted to strap her to Old Sparky and throw the switch. And they had the ultimate silver bullet to do it. Jorge Rivi Ayala. Her favorite hitman had agreed to testify against her in exchange for his life. He was the only man who could directly tie Griselda to the murders, specifically the horrific collateral death of the 2-year-old Johnny Castro. The prosecution's case was bulletproof, open and shut. All they had to do was put Rivi on the stand. But here is the fatal flaw in relying on a sociopathic, charismatic killer as your star witness. They don't have an off switch. Rivi wasn't just sitting quietly in his maximum security cell waiting for trial. He was using the phone. But he wasn't calling his lawyers. He was calling the secretaries working for the very prosecutors trying to execute his former boss. It was a scandal so utterly bizarre that Hollywood screenwriters would reject it for being too unrealistic. Rivi Ayala had seduced 3 secretaries in the state attorney's office. He was having phone sex from prison. He was exchanging explicit photographs. He was ordering them to smuggle him contraband. When the defense attorneys got wind of the tapes and the illicit affairs, the bulletproof case against the Godmother didn't just crack, it detonated. The prosecution was humiliated. Their star witness was completely, irreparably discredited. You cannot put a man on the stand to testify in a death penalty case when he's been compromising the very office prosecuting the trial. The guaranteed death sentence evaporated into thin air. In a twist of sickening, infuriating irony, the woman who ordered the massacre of hundreds accepted a plea deal. She was sentenced to 2 decades in a federal penitentiary, but she had cheated the electric chair. She had won. You would think a concrete box would finally neuter the Black Widow. You would think 20 years in solitary would break her. But you don't build a billion-dollar cartel by giving up when you lose a piece on the chessboard. From behind bars, Griselda began plotting a move so audacious, so completely deranged, it involved kidnapping a member of the American political royal family. Hit subscribe, because in our final chapter, the Godmother rolls the dice one last time from the inside of a federal penitentiary. And we find out exactly what happens when the past finally comes back to collect its bloody debt. When you lock a predator in a cage, they don't stop hunting. They just learn to hunt through the bars. By the late 1990s, Griselda Blanco was deteriorating in a federal penitentiary. The empire was gone. Her hitmen were dead or in witness protection. 3 of her 4 sons had been hunted down and assassinated in the streets of Colombia. Most people would seek absolution. Griselda, she sought leverage. And her target wasn't a rival dealer, it was American royalty. She formulated a plot so completely unhinged, the FBI initially thought it was a joke. Griselda ordered her last remaining loyalists on the outside to kidnap John F. Kennedy Jr. The plan was to hold the son of an assassinated American president hostage, offering to trade his life for her absolute freedom. It was the ultimate display of her twisted narcissism. She truly believed she possessed the power to bend the United States government to her will. But the days of unquestioned loyalty were dead. Her inside man, a mid-level smuggler, panicked. He took the plot straight to the FBI. The kidnapping was foiled before a single move was made, and the feds threw Griselda into solitary confinement. She was finally, truly neutralized. Stripped of her money, her men, and her mind, she faded into the gray walls of the prison system. The 1980s neon burned out. The 90s bled into the 2000s, and the world forgot about the Godmother. By 2004, having quietly finished her sentence, Griselda Blanco was deported back to Medellin. She was in her late 60s. She lived quietly. She read the Bible. To the neighbors, she was just an old woman with a dark past. She thought she had beaten the game. She had outlived Pablo Escobar. She had survived the DEA, the Italian mob, and her own hitmen. But on September 3rd, 2012, she bought meat at the Cardizo butcher shop, ready to go home and cook dinner. But the underworld has a very long memory, and blood debts do not expire. The assassin didn't stop. He didn't say a word. 2 hollow-point bullets struck the Godmother, one in the head, one in the shoulder. She was dead before her body hit the pavement. The plastic bag of beef spilled across the hot asphalt, mingling with the blood of the woman who had drowned 2 countries in it. It was a profoundly ironic, poetic justice. The architect of the drive-by motorcycle assassination was erased by the exact nightmare she had invented. Griselda Blanco didn't just break the glass ceiling of the criminal underworld. She shattered it with a Mac-10 and walked over the shards barefoot. She built a $2 billion empire on a mountain of skulls, proving that in the pursuit of absolute power, ruthlessness has no gender. She died in the dirt, just like she started. A brutal end for a brutal queen. But if you thought Griselda's reign of terror was the absolute peak of cartel madness, you aren't ready for the man who surrendered to the government only to build his own luxury 5-star prison to run his empire from the inside. Hit subscribe, because the madness of Pablo Escobar is just beginning. See you in the underworld.